Okay, welcome back. Today's video is going to be another composition video of different flights. As you can see on the map, it's the Jerusalem to Cape Town flights, with stops in Khartoum, Mombasa, and Johannesburg. Long flights, so I felt like I could combine them all into some kind of meaningful flow. So here we are, taking off from the same airport we landed at near Jerusalem, and then hooking it into a left banking climb to give us like a little bit of an aerial tour of Jerusalem on the way out. I don't know enough about the particular buildings in Jerusalem to point any of them out though, so sorry about that. Once we were satisfied, we headed for the coast. Lots of turbulence over here. But that's probably just me shaking. I had hiccups a lot for these flights. I believe that's Tel Aviv on the right. I was looking for a runway that I used to land at over here. I've done this flight between Jerusalem and Cairo, Cairo and Jerusalem a couple times in the past, and it's always a wonderful flight. Yeah, so the Africa decision. It's been a big standing decision for me for a while now. I was finally at a point, when we hit Jerusalem where I needed to make that decision and, either go southwest to Cairo or northwest to Cyprus. But I'm glad I chose Africa, even though there's a lot of ground to cover. It's still pretty nice out there, in most places. So here we are, descending down towards the Suez Canal, which is world famous recently because of the Evergreen ship getting stuck in it. I believe there was a battle in Suez during World War I. At 10,000, 15,000 feet, you can actually make out the entire length of it by like getting down close and seeing it. Yeah, we're gonna make our way now across the river delta to Alexandria. And I don't think it's the exact same location as the Library of Alexandria, like the famous one from history books. But there is a new Library of Alexandria here, and I wanted to see that one. I'm going to be visiting a lot of historical places during these flights, starting with the Library of Alexandria. So I'll be including all of those. And there it is, the white circle with the bite taken out of it, looking like a silicon chip there on the ground. And then we head southeast towards Cairo. Cairo really is a beautiful city. There's a lot of it indistinguishable from desert and the Nile from up here, but the closer you get, the closer you realize exactly how big it is. And you can see the pyramids there in the distance a little bit. Here we are, quite closer to the pyramids. And we're gonna give a little tour of that real quick. Yeah, the city comes right up to the edge of it. And I believe these are the pyramids of Giza. You can see a little bus turnaround circle right in front. And then the Sphinx down below. A bunch of other satellite buildings. I saw another video of somebody playing Microsoft Flight Sim, and a pilot who has actually flown here before in real life, I mean, was talking about a Pizza Hut somewhere over there. So you can apparently have a pizza and stare at the pyramids. Super cool. Yep, that's a legit helipad in Microsoft Flight Sim right there. But over here in this lighter tan patch right here, there are like 4 fake ones. Probably real in real life, but not accessible to us apparently. And instead of continuing on south, we're actually going to stay at just above ground and then book it towards these other pyramids back here. I don't know much about these pyramids, so I'll include some text when we get closer so we know which ones we're looking at. I really like this one in particular because it looks like one you'd make out of sand, and then just the natural weight of the sand and erosion pulling the surfaces away. It's exactly what it looks like. But yeah, booking it to cruise altitude now, headed towards Luxor. Here you get a really nice view of the Nile peeling away from us into the desert. The Sahara is a pretty vast, gigantic desert to fly over, and so I ended up skipping a lot of it. Khartoum, being our first major stop, is kind of the edge of it, and it gets a lot more greener south of there. So here we are in descent into Luxor. Also known as the Valley of Kings, I think. It's the site of the Ancient Pharaoh Palace. We'll get a better look at that once we get closer. So it's gonna be right here. You'll see a little grid of trees leading to a facility in the back. That's it. It also extends down to the coast on the left there. I think it's really cool that people live around this. But yeah, we now we're headed to the desert. So faced with the prospect of flying this entire distance just for Cape Town and some pyramids, I felt like it was necessary to add a bunch of stuff together into my itinerary so that I'd actually have something to do on the way down and not just 60,000 feet cruise altitude all the way down to Cape Town. It's not that there's nothing to look at. I mean, this is a lot better than flying over the ocean. But it's still vast quantities of emptiness down below, so. And those farms down to the left are kind of my cue to start my descent here, so. What we're looking for is a site called the Nabta Playa, which you'll get a better view of here in a second. It's like 2,000 years older than Stonehenge, and it is well, it's just another henge. But it's small and not easy to find. So we're actually gonna make a couple passes to see if we can find it. I had Google Maps open next to me, Google Earth. I made sure to mark it on the map screen. Don't know how accurate it is, but I'm going to be circling around that waypoint a couple times. So yeah, first approach. Notice for the first time that there's a shadow bug around the aircraft for whatever reason. But I didn't see the site, so. You get a real Tatooine vibe down here. So close to the ground. It feels almost alien. The closest civilized item is a road and some power lines. Yeah, looking back at the footage, I actually flew over it the first time. On accident. There's the road. And some semblance of terrain dedicated to looking like the power lines. And this is south of the site. So we're going to be hooking a left. Heading back up there. I wasn't confident during this whole thing whether I'd actually seen this. not. And I kind of trusted that me editing it afterwards, I'd be able to see the exact location, and I did. And it turns out I actually did see it. I noticed it pretty obviously in the footage, and I just didn't think it was that. I wasn't confident. So yeah, it's gonna be up here on the left. Very, very, very small from this height, but it's gonna be right there. And so you'll see these two wave-like structures next to it. It's really hard to make out what it is, but there's two of them right next to each other. And here's the Wikipedia page on it, if you want to look it up later. But yeah, I didn't see it. I didn't think that was it, or was looking for something else. It's really hard to gauge your height here, like gauge your altitude, because you have nothing down below to make reference to. So here's my third and final pass. This is the one I actually did see it at, so you'll see it here for a second. Oh, there it is right there. Yep, and I'm looking at it, hardcore looking at it and following it with my eyes. Confident that it might be it. To some level of confidence that I had just looked at the right thing. But yeah, so the astronauts, when they landed on the moon, they had the same issue, apparently. You'd think that with our vision being the way it is, being able to see depth, that we'd be able to tell exactly how far things are, but we use a lot of reference, like size of buildings, size of trees, to get a sense of how high we are. And when you're over the desert or over the moon, I guess even, it's really hard to make out how high up you are, or how far things are. There's stories of astronauts almost driving off the edge of cliffs because they look like so much farther away than it was. So yeah, here we are meeting the Nile again. It's been a while since we saw it. And this time we're heading to the Meroe Pyramids, which I actually didn't find this trip, but we're gonna head there anyway. About this time I got a phone call from my mom, and for at least 45 minutes she and I had deep discussion on the things you can find. So yeah, here's the Wikipedia page for Pyramids of Meroe, and they're down here somewhere. Not easily distinguishable on any map, certainly not in Microsoft Flight Sim, but they're somewhere. But yeah, my mom, in her own words, is an amateur Egyptologist. So flying over these locations, getting her opinion on my flight path and the things I was choosing to see, that was really important to me. I lucked out that she happened to call right as we were doing this, so here we are, coming into Khartoum. We're starting to head towards Khartoum. But my battery was low, And I did what I guess in the space industry we call a suicide burn. But it's not really a burn in this case, it's just like you gun it for the airport as quickly as you can and then spam the air brakes as late as you can so that by the time you actually get to the runway you're going the exact speed that you want. And there you go. End of the first video, the first flight video that I have on my records, the decent landing. Next day we took off, headed for Mombasa, and this one is a super empty flight. I think the only thing we really looked for was Kilimanjaro, and you can see like I'm trying to measure using the map screen to see our progress because I can't zoom out too far. We'd started flying over green areas though, so that was interesting, and the clouds started coming back. And there you see it's an airport called Lokichogio, which is the one that I decided to make a pit stop at. Didn't need to. Could have kept flying the whole time. But my brain was dead. And here you'll see one of my gripes about this game. And I understand it's probably not their fault, it's probably the fault of humanity for not taking better pictures of barren wastelands, but a lot of the terrain in this game is patched together with poorly taken satellite imagery. And so flying over any of the areas that are not frequented by human beings results in losing immersion, which is another reason why I was so hesitant to fly through Africa. I'd done this before. I'd flown the exact opposite route on my first world tour, so I knew that there was nothing to see. We're going to ignore the fact that I almost ran off the runway and just pretend that I had intended to do a touch and go there the whole time. Yeah. One of the major decisions. Look at that line dividing the two satellite images. For whatever reason, the deserts are a lot less populated with terrain fixes of that kind. At least they seem like it. I don't know if that's the truth, but anytime you're flying over greenery, it gets worse. Or mountains. Mountains are really bad. Unfortunately, if you fly over large swaths of Russia or China, you get the same effect. Same with like Indonesia. So I've been trying to, for most of this flight, avoid that kind of stuff. But even here at Kilimanjaro, a world famous mountain, we're gonna get weird terrain stuff. Giant square of brown popped down in the middle of a forest. We also got some weird behavior coming around the edge of Kilimanjaro, and you'll see it here. But there was a kind of a bit of lag for no reason. Yeah, there it is. Nairobi should be to the right. Yeah, here we are, heading towards Mombasa for the end of our second flight. A little final look back towards Kilimanjaro and the interesting terrain maps. This coast of Africa, the east coast of Africa, is where a majority of the influence from the Middle East came. So there's a lot of mosques. And if I'm not mistaken, this is the part of Africa that speaks Swahili. Specifically, we're in Kenya, by the way. Mombasa and Nairobi are both in Kenya. There's the airport down to the left. We're going to be hooking a left turn into it, but I wanted to get this view because it brought us to the Indian Ocean, and if we had flown through Mauritius and Madagascar, it would have brought us here. So it was weird kind of completing that half circle. And if I'm not mistaken, by the way, I want to go back real quick to the Swahili thing. I believe Swahili actually means like coast, or of the coast, or something like that. It's a lot of really cool historical documentaries that you can watch about this area. It used to be really advanced for the time. I think they had the best steel production for like 2,000 years, up until probably Japan took over. So that was really cool. This is the next day. We're flying pretty close to evening, pretty close to sunset, and we're chasing down that sun to a point, headed towards Johannesburg. We're going to be making one stop in between, and you'll see it right there on the map. Still wasn't using the little nav map, so I wasn't able to see a lot of information about where we were going. And I ended up coming down a little too close to where we were, a little too steeply, and had to use some low flying distance judgment to kind of gauge where we were and where we were going. You'll see us actually. I had thought we were supposed to hit one valley in particular. But right here, come up over the top of this ridge, and it's over there. Yeah, we're wasting time a little bit, unfortunately. The sun was starting to go down, as you can see by the long shadows. Just like in Australia, this airport was really difficult to see. I'm just now noticing that town there on the right. I think that was a town. But yeah, I'd finally seen it, finally knew where we were going, and took us down to it. So yeah, got fuel, turned around, and popped back up into the sunset. So here we are at cruise once again, heading towards Johannesburg, keeping our eye on the sun and the terrain below as it kind of elds into this giant emptiness below us. Yeah, we're flying over land, but you can't even tell because it's dark. And yeah, we just got a nice view of the sunset the whole way in. About this point, I wasn't sure how much power we had on the Oculus, so I was trying to make a decision on where to land. I still hadn't, at this point, found a reasonable way to gauge distance and battery life properly, so Johannesburg was possibly close enough, so I kind of just kept the aircraft headed that direction and hoped that by the time we got some of the warnings that we were expecting, that we would be close enough to one of those airports in South Africa to actually be able to land at it properly. There it goes. So we're kind of over Johannesburg, finally getting a view of the city properly. Thanks in part to the fact that it's so dark outside, we're able to see the street lights and stuff like that, so city lights. And knowing then that we're over the city and finally capable of landing, that we're going to have enough time to actually do that, but you know, still wasn't quite sure. we were running the clock here, so another suicide burn down to the surface. At this point, I was pretty well relieved that we'd made it to South Africa. The remaining time between Johannesburg and Cape Town is not much, so I knew that a large majority of the time between Jerusalem and Cape Town had been washed away by time. So here we are, next day. I wanted to take an opportunity to download 2 things and try them out. The Scrapyard Monster by Lord of Fries, I think, and Little Nav Map, which I still had not figured out at this point. So we are over Johannesburg trying them out. And yeah, I wanted to make sure that I got that working before our next flight, so I paused, came back in after I'd figured out what exactly was the issue, and immediately was killed by the trim resetting, I guess. But I could tell behind the VFR map that Little Nav Map was working, so finally had a map with the kind of data that we required. So here's our first flight with Little Nav Map. Still not knowing much about it, but definitely excited to see it from Johannesburg to Cape Town. And there it is. There's the whole flight. With progress, able to zoom out as far as we need. Just a wonder.
So yeah, I wanted to come in here and explain something a little bit afterwards. The top of descent and top of climb that Little Nav Map provides are entirely dependent upon aircraft performance, but I couldn't find an F-16 aircraft performance that I liked, so I basically had to make my own. I made 2. I made one for the 60,000 feet cruise and one for like around 10,000, and with the 5-degree climb and the 15-degree descent that I was looking for. And so the first couple flights that I did in this with Little Nav Map were me basically just trying to figure that out, build that profile. And this is important because if we know the time it takes to get to cruise and time it takes to descend and all of that, I get actually for the first time ever decent information on how long it takes to fly these flights. But one of the things I really love about Little Nav Map is it gives you a top of descent, which I have been sorely missing. I was kind of just following the 2-inch rule, I called it, where when you were zoomed out all the way, if you were about 2 inches away from your destination, you would start your descent. Not great. Yeah, at this point I noticed incredibly beautiful terrain developing below us and to the right, and I wanted to know what the hell that was, and voila, Little Nav Map gives us the opportunity to see exactly what we need to see. The name of the national park that all that beauty is emanating from. So thoroughly worth it. Now at this point, like I said, I was still playing around with it, but I knew that I wanted to kind of include the lead into the airport in Cape Town, which is kind of below us there. And you'll see on the map it's the square, very large downwind bases and finals, and eventually I scrapped this in favor of the
the military approach to the runway lining, and it's because of speed. Doing this is probably for the best when it comes to like the A320 or the 747 or something, but not for the F-16. Yeah, it takes way too long. Very useful in IFR conditions, but not for VFR. VFR just takes forever. But yeah, it obviously worked. We lined up pretty perfectly with the runway. Didn't have to do much, which is why it was so boring coming in. So yeah, we finally made it to Cape Town. A lot of hours went into this, like 6 hours maybe, to get us here. And I don't know much about Cape Town, aside from the fact that they had the Volvo Ocean Race here, and there's a couple other places that we'll look at in a second, but I made one very important discovery on the way to a parking spot here in Cape Town, and it would not have happened if it weren't for the fact that we were here. So, flight to Africa, very worth it for this reason alone. I was going through the configuration settings, scrolled all the way down, just looking at what they had, and then I noticed a option to trigger show wind arrow. And I was very emotional about that. Yeah, little nav map single-handedly made this entire experience better for me. Easier for me too, so we didn't stay in Cape Town long after this, but we did stay in it for a little bit, and I wanted to show some of the flights that I did here. So none of them were in the F-16. We tried out a couple more aircraft. The three that we tried out, I flew random paths around Cape Town, so got to see a lot more. Yeah, that wind. That's me still freaking out about it. Also, this flight plan log, or flight plan list, very useful. The ability to rename your waypoints came as a great surprise. Here we are flying a left traffic pattern from that airport in the C-17, which I downloaded. Still not using a little nav map though, apparently. I don't know why. This was an interesting aircraft. Big. Then here we are in the T-36, I think, is the it's T-36 or T-37, I can't remember to be honest. But it is a side-by-side seat. And we're headed to probably the only part of Cape Town that I actually recognize. And if you've ever watched helicopter videos on YouTube, eventually you'll find a group that operates out of this specific location that operates Hueys. Right down there on this little stretch of land. It's called Cape Town Helicopters, and they take their passengers on tours of the terrain, I guess. Probably to that national park that we were just looking at. So yeah, still on that left traffic, but kind of hugging the mountains to the west of them, on the edge of the peninsula. next aircraft we tried was the Hawker Hunter. And, you know, I'm comfortable flying these, especially when they're, like, this well done. But the visibility in this thing is not great. And I feel like it's a relic of a earlier time when it came to aircraft visibility. Probably defense, you know, like you didn't necessarily want the pilot as exposed as he could be to the outside because then he could be shot. This aircraft was super floaty. I know that it comes with parachutes, but I didn't have to use them, so I didn't. Wasn't trying to replace the F-16, surprisingly, so... Actually, for the first time ever with the little nav map, completely happy with the F-16 as the final aircraft for the rest of this flight, so... and then the last one we tried was the P3, which I found on flightsim.to. You can catch a glimpse of it a little bit there, but I didn't figure it out until here when I stood up that it was using the 747 cockpit in the 747 location and not inside the actual P3 cockpit location. So, yeah, that's gonna be it. I hope you enjoyed this video. Next video is probably gonna be up to Gibraltar from here.